All right, we're here live. We're here with Aaron. Introduce yourself, my friend.
Thank you for having me on, Jeff. Aaron Collins, White Owl, Murphy's Law, Butterbrain, Scarhead, White Trash, New York music history, bass player, vocalist, and songwriter.
Sick. I met you when you were first in Murphy's Law playing bass.
I remember.
I feel like you have that fishbone style when you slap the bass and you kind of like stomp around.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, Fishbone was definitely a huge influence, but I kind of gravitated toward that slap bass sound from like a young age. My brother was a drummer at the time, picked up guitar, and he kind of taught me into getting a bass. And for some reason, I just took to that like slap funk style. It's how I naturally picked it up. And then later, like players like Flea and Norwood from Fishbone were guys that I definitely admired or had that same vibe of my bass playing, I would say.
What do you think got you into that, like the funk?
The truth is that I kind of happened naturally. Like even my brother was kind of like, "Why are you playing like that?" Because we were like kind of grew up on metal, and I was when I first got the bass, I was playing like Maiden riffs, like Steve Harris, the bass player for Maiden, like very much like with the fingers. I never use a pick. I always play my fingers. I don't know. I just started that's a really good question, but I just started like playing slap bass. A big influence was my music teacher in high school. We had a jazz teacher. It's how I met most of the horn players and the players in Butterbrain was from my high school jazz band class, and he gave us a lot of funk and Herbie Hancock stuff like that to play, and I just kind of rocked it like naturally. And he was like, that was my style. I just kind of settled into it. So it was more natural than following Norwood or Flea. But when I saw those guys doing that on the rock tip, punk tip, it kind of validated what I was doing. Like, see, these guys are doing it and doing it successfully. At the time, when I was in high school, like in the late 80s, they were still like underground, so nothing had blown up. We all know Red Hot Chili Peppers, like, turned into like a stadium act, but Fishbone is more like, where I relate to, because that's, first off, like, kind of the sound I was influenced by, and second of all, the fact that they never blew like to that level and remained like a club act is kind of kept them to like a personal gift. Like, the people that are real Fishbone heads, you'll see them at a show almost like the Grateful Dead or a niche thing, and like, it's like we get to keep them to ourselves, and they're still killing it live like the same way they were back 25, 30 years ago. So I got nothing but respect for all those guys.
You think like, I noticed style, right? You have like a certain style of playing the bass, and a friend of mine, Gary Dredd, says, it's one thing to be talented at your instrument or your tool, whether you're a photographer or a bass player, a guitar player, but if you have style, then you go above and beyond because people are going to remember you. And I feel like, especially like the New York hardcore scene, the fact that their style is like above and beyond. But with you obviously know how to play really well. But I think the style adds to it, that you kind of hop around and do that that style, especially when I saw you with Murphy's Law. And now you have this project, Butterbrain.
Yep.
And what exactly are you trying to do with Butterbrain?
It was my vision from a younger age to put together a band like that. Most of the players were from our original band that had to deal with Elektra Records called White Trash. The band, had a successful album, but was kind of short-lived. We had like a one-hit wonder that was played on like the Headbangers Ball and the MTV Buzz Bin, so we blew up quick. We were all young, and we had big management and a big label. And that being said, we had different visions.
Fast forward like 20 years later, you're in this like ska band.
Yep.
And you're doing it the right way. You're trying to evolve
as a unit. So when I look at Fishbone, I would say that is definitely like a model of how, we're all friends that kind of grew up together. Sally Mae, the female singer, came on as a guest on a singles.
I know you guys know each other from the hardcore scene, right? So what I want to know is, how do you go from being in this one-hit wonder commercial success, and then how do you get invited into like a legendary band like Murphy's Law to play bass? Well, I want to hear that story.
That's a pretty good question. That started with my buddy Danny Diablo. We met playing. He was dating a girl from my neighborhood, and we met on a basketball court in my neighborhood. And amongst all the brothers playing ball was this tattooed freak with like a red afro, and me with like long hair metalhead dude like stomping around. And we both were like, who are you? Who the fuck's this guy? You know, and our mutual friend was like, you guys got to link up. You know, you both do music. You guys like totally similar, like same kind of style. So Danny was definitely my introduction, or pulled me into what ended up being Scarhead, but at the time it was Crown of Thorns. And
So that was the first band you were in with Danny Diablo, Crown of Thorns.
yes, and my junior high school buddy that played with the Misfits, Eric Arce, Goat, known as Goat Arce. He had left Murphy's Law and was starting to play with Danny. So he was calling me. I was getting double hit. Hey, yo, why don't you join the band?
So you met Danny Diablo, who, if you don't know him, he's also in Transplants with Tim Armstrong. He does a lot of like hip hop things. So you guys formed a band called Crown of Thorns, which was like the precursor to you getting into Murphy's Law.
Yeah, I joined Crown of Thorns first, and then he had put out an EP with Scarhead, but he wanted to make that like the main focus. And I was like, I'm down with that. So that's where I got more involved, writing, living the lifestyle, the party. We were a party punk rock band, and then so I was fully immersed in that. Danny, Goat was on drums, and it was Mitz and Little Tony on guitar and bass at that time. Crown of Thorns was Danny, Goat, and another guy, Dean Rispler.
So you went from Crown of Thorns, and then you joined another band called Scarhead with kind of like two or three of the same people.
I had a short-lived experience with Crown of Thorns, but that's how I joined for like the end of that first run. It was actually Mike DeJean and Dimmy on drums, like that really were founders of that band. So I was just like a fill-in at the end. And then we said, hey, let's do Scarhead, and we turned our focus for Crown of Thorns to Scarhead. So Scarhead is more
Were
like...
you in the first incarnation of Scarhead?
They had put out an EP before with, I think, Hoyo on bass from Madball, Toby Morse from H2O, so it was a mixed match. It was more of a fun, I think, EP project. Dimmy from Crown of Thorns on drums. It was a mishmash. And then Ezek's vision was to let's turn that into the main focus. The Wu-Tang Clan of hardcore punk rock music, multiple singers, a squadron of dudes on stage. And at the time, I wasn't really like a big Wu-Tang head. These guys were, but I liked the vision. I was like, yeah, can you write us some party music, like punk rock style? Like, yeah. It was something more up my alley that I felt comfortable doing. I might have got a little too immersed with the lifestyle because there was a lot of partying and definitely my life kind of spiraled out of control during those years. And then
Right now you're sober though.
Yes. Yep.
So you were 20 years ago you're partying, and now your main focus is sobriety, right?
Yeah, I've bought into the outlook that without my sobriety first, the rest of it falls apart. So it's become a priority. What I was noticing in life-wise was that my relationships, band relationships, work environment, everything was suffering. So if I don't put that first, then everything kind of falls by the wayside afterwards.
I like how you said that. You said you bought into it. It's almost like you don't want to admit. Like
it took me a long time. I've struggled with sobriety for a long, long time. 5.5 years ago, my brother passed. Went to the hospital with chest pains, got misdiagnosed, died in the parking lot of the hospital. My girlfriend of 5 years left 2 days after we buried him, mostly due to my drinking and drugging. So I couldn't blame her, but it was a double kick in the nuts that I needed to say, hey, maybe I better check my lifestyle. Didn't happen overnight. It's been about a 5-year journey since that point. And yeah.
How are you doing right now?
I'm doing good right now, thank God. They have a saying in the sober world, one day at a time. So that's kind of how I look at things, one day at a time.
Like what I noticed about you is you don't really talk about it. Like you pretty much go into your band, you post about your band. You don't really look for pity or anything.
That's pretty interesting.
I feel like a lot of people that do that, they look at me. You haven't mentioned once, like if somebody just met you, they wouldn't know that you're in recovery.
It took me a long time to, I've bounced around a lot of different outlooks on that. It's funny you said it. I've gone online and said, hey, I'm getting sober, and that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. Like, I forget, my MO would be to get 3 months or 6 months of clean and sober time, and then I'd usually slip up. It's kind of, it took me a long time to realize that's part of the process. For some people just fucking, hey man, I could turn off the switch and
Cold turkey.
cold turkey. Me, that definitely wasn't working for me, and it got to a point where I wanted to stay clean and I couldn't, and I needed to dig deeper into other resources. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't like to wave the flag or announce, hey, look at me. But I'm here to, the people in my sober network know that I'm there to support them and that I'm, a phone call away. And everybody's like one slip up away from relapsing. And it's the name of a song on one of the new Butterbrain albums. And I've had my share of them. So I have a compassion for it. And I don't like to, maybe put myself out there because it's a one day at a time thing. So as I get more comfortable in my sobriety, I'm getting to a point where I could share that and mentor or sponsor like other people. But because I've been on shaky ground for a while, it's just more important for me to get my own head together. So maybe that's coming more for me to be more public about it.
Cheers for that.
Thank you.
Staying sober. Drink the tea. My question is, so you're putting all this energy into music, and is that helping you? Do you feel like it's helping you take the reins on sobriety?
That's a great question. Yeah. When you start to clear your head and this music that's sitting there. So for years I was doing, playing with Murphy's Law, playing with Scarhead, even with White Trash to an extent, although that was partly my baby too. It was a shared experience. So it was, I never really got to like steer the ship. With Butterbrain, I'm kind of doing what I always wanted to do with the crew of people that I always wanted to do it with. It's definitely helped. There's a few, when I first got clean like 5 years ago, there's a few things that jumped out as goals, like priorities in my life. One of them was to buy a house. One of them was to stop focusing on other music, do what you want to do. Make that a reality, and be a better person in relationships. A lot of goals. And slowly by surely, I'm checking a bunch of them off the bucket list. It's a challenge to my sobriety as well, dealing with 8 different people and their different influences and ways that they want to do things. Running the day-to-day operations of Butterbrain is a challenge in of itself, from booking to creatively writing to managing the 8 personalities. So it can be stressful. So without my sobriety first, it could easily like eat me up, but I think I'm in a good place to handle the stresses and pressures of running a band these days. So it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. So in some ways it challenges my sobriety. In some ways it's the ultimate outlet for my sobriety. There were many people in sobriety that suggested, hey, maybe you should step away from the music for a while. And I've known other, more accomplished artists than me, actors and musicians that have had to do that or chosen to do that successfully. I'm a stubborn fucking motherfucker sometimes, so I have a hard time taking those suggestions, and I wanted to do it my way, and it led to a lot of relapsing, but it also, in that process, I was taking tours and taking, I was getting away with like 3-day weekends with some of the most famous party bands in the New York, punk rock scene. And it got to a point where I kind of realized if I don't stop everything for a minute, because I love playing with Murphy's Law, I love playing with Scarhead, I love doing, being there when I can. But if I didn't take a minute to focus on Butterbrain, it would be a hole in my soul that was missing. I couldn't really fully give myself. If I really look at it deeply, I probably never, part of the reason that I never fully did give myself to those projects because there was something in me that was important for me to do. But I love playing with those guys. And Murphy's Law in particular, like the music is right up my alley as an 80s, 90s kid that grew up with that and plays that kind of style that, there's an element of reggae, funk, ska that playing with Murphy's was like, butter, like to me, it just fucking, it was natural.
But also, at the same time, like playing in Murphy's Law, it's almost like lifting you up to triple OG status as a musician in New York City. Like now it's like you're Aaron who was in Murphy's Law.
Well, Murphy's Law it's like a rite of passage for like New York hardcore musicians. If someone did like a Murphy's Law member tree, it's pretty fucking amazing. I mean,
But you were in it for a very long time. It's not like you were in there for like a week or two.
there's been some guys that were in for a week or two and couldn't hang, and then there's been some long-term guys. But
But for you, you were in there for a couple of years, right?
I played on the Parties Over album, although I had left, but my picture's not on it. By the time, you might not know that, but I played on the Parties Over, like the last full length they did, and I did like a 3 or 4 year stint with Murphy's, like about 98 to like 2001, 2002.
Is that when they released "What Will the Neighbors Think" video? That's like one of my favorite videos ever.
I was after that. That's one of my favorite records too. Dedicated. I came in after that.
That's the one with the clay figures on the cover?
Yes, and that's Uncle Al that did the clay figure. Uncle Al is the original Murphy's Law guitar player, and a Queens guy. He was our connection with the Butterbrain guys to Murphy's Law. We would cross shows together, even though the styles were different. We looked, as musicians, we all looked out for each other back then. And as high school musicians, even though we were on different scenes, we supported each other. So, but Uncle Al, to this day, he's involved in the Butterbrain videos.
Really?
Some of the footage that you shot for Guinea Pig, he's the one doing the animation in that.
Oh, no.
And he's done like 2 or 3 animation pieces for us from Brazil. He's in Brazil now, so I send the idea and he gets back to me, and he's an amazing artist, and a great guy.
How did it feel working with Angelo, the singer of Fishbone?
Oh man, dream come true, man. First of all, one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite frontmen, performers, and musician, like sax player playing the theremin, like, the sound of Butterbrain fits him. Like when we linked up through you for the Raised Fist Fest, and he sat in with the band. He had just released that covers comp of Ugly, of Fishbone's version of Ugly. So we're like, all right, we'll do Ugly. I was like, we did another cover of Love Will Keep Us Together. You want that? And he's like, all right, like what else we do? I don't know. Let's just figure it out. And by the end of the show, we did like a 20-minute jam on a Butterbrain song. That it felt like he was in the band for for a lifetime. So, if I had grown up in LA or if he had grown up in New York, I have a feeling that we probably would have ended up in the same. I think we come from the same breed of musical influences, and I don't know, it's the same kind of style. I got to collaborate with one of my idols, mentors and idols.
The song you guys put out, we're putting out the vinyl next year. Probably April for the festival part 2.
No doubt.
So hopefully we'll get like a green vinyl, a green Butterbrain Angelo Moore
Yep.
vinyl.
Dr. Mad Vibe.
Dr. Mad Vibe, right? That's his stage name. So where do you see yourself in the future? Where do you want to go with the band and with your artistic journey, especially with the Sobriety?
That's a really good question, because I would say Sobriety has helped me lead the way, in the sense that I feel like a lot of good, positive feedback has been coming from Butterbrain and in general. And I think part of the reason, or maybe, who knows, but I feel part of the reason is that I've relinquished control over the outcome of things. But part of what Sobriety has taught me is clean your side of the street, do the next right thing. You can't control the next person.
Accept people for who they are.
And you know what? If the Butterbrain vinyl, sells 1,000 copies or 1,000,000 copies, that's out of my control. What I can control is making the best product available, making it available in the best way possible, trying to have as much fun creating as possible. So that's where my focus is, in the creative aspect. Going back to your question of how that affects Sobriety, is sometimes it's challenging to let go of the outcome, and sometimes it's difficult to know where's the line that you cross between knowing when to let it go and when to know. I can't let this go. I must do this the way it's supposed to be done. So it's a daily challenge, but it's been a pleasure to navigate through it sober. I never thought, as being someone that liked drinking. Some of the artists I grew up admiring, like Jimi Hendrix and these guys, some of their best art was done while fucked up or while on acid or whatever. So it was a challenge for me to create, to not buy into that and say, lose your crutch. It's like losing a crutch. All right, now that crutch is gone, how good are you really? You know, can you create something cool or that resonates while sober, while clean? I mean, I believe artistic freedom should, like, you know, you should be able to say what you want. I could talk about, you know, for example, on the new Butterbrain album, and it's probably going to be the next single that we release, and hopefully a video with Raised Fist. It's called Relapse, and it's pretty much a story about little vignettes about people's relapse. And I was kind of like, oh man, is this like cool for me to do? And I was like, who the fuck cares? It's artistic. Like, I'm allowed to talk about anything I want, like getting fucked up, not getting fucked up. I could have all these ideas spinning in my head, but they don't reach fruition because I'm so fucked up that I'm not picking up a guitar or picking up a voice recorder and throwing the ideas down or making them come to life. It takes me to be clean and sober to make that happen in the best way possible. So it becomes a bit of a responsibility, the band, to me, because I could say fuck it, like, you know, I'd rather fucking lock myself in a room and get high, and what we'll sacrifice is the music created. And I could play, you know, I did it for 20 years, pretty, and a lot of, I would tell myself, I don't have a problem, because I could go on stage in front of 5,000 people and rock it while fucked up out of my brain, you know? But is that really, you know, how are you operating the next day or the next night? That blocked me from doing the creative process that I'm doing now with Butterbrain. So it would be a no-no. I'd be scared if I went back to that lifestyle. Probably the creativity would dry up.
It's almost like you've learned. It
took me a long time.
You know, it's about repetition, right? Like, if you're repeating the same cycle, then you're never learning. But if you keep repeating and finally you're gonna break the cycle, like, you know what, I'm gonna do something different, and it's a different outcome that's positive, I think that's good. It doesn't matter how many times.
You hit the nail on the head, and when we get in that pattern, especially, like, you know, as we get older, doing the same things over and over again, it's harder and harder to break. It's like habits, you know. It's like smoking cigarettes or anything else, or you know, good habits bad. You go to the gym every day, so if you get in a habit of doing it, it becomes almost like second nature. Then that's great. But once you break out of that, I'm trying to stay in the habit of breaking out of bad habits and forming good ones.
That's good. Give me like a good mosh pit story or a show story from the hardcore punk days in the city. Something memorable when it comes to music and inspiration. Like, what do you remember from going to shows?
One of the things I was jealous of the singers was that they could throw down the mic and fucking just dive into the crowd, because I wanted that experience. And as a bass player, there's some photos of me, like I would get in the mix like that. Like, I would fucking, you know, stage dive into the crowd with the bass. Not most, you know, instrumentalists do that shit. I think I was one of the wilder ones like that, like, because I loved that interaction with the crowd. I mean, it's what drew me to punk rock, hardcore music in the first place. You know, as a kid, I grew up as a metalhead, and White Trash was formed around a metal base, even though we had influences of ska and, you know, funk and punk and stuff like that. And we would have mosh pits at our show, but it was more like, you know, we were a little bit more mainstream. It wasn't like the pits at like CB's or playing with, you know, the pits could get violent at Murphy's or Madball or Scarhead. That interaction with the crowd, like, you know, I love it as a fan, and as on stage, I fucking, you know, I love both of it, man. It's a rush, you know. I'm blessed to be able to experience that. Some people outside of the punk, hardcore, or music scene don't really get it, you know.
Have you jumped in the crowd lately? With your bass?
That's a funny question. I've been a little bit lame lately because I had a hip surgery, probably due to, you know.
How old are you?
I turned 50 last year. I'm going to be 51 in like 5 days on Sunday.
Happy birthday.
Actually 3 days. Yeah, thank you. And my big birthday bash is tomorrow at Kingsland, and I'm about to fucking get back at it. So I've been laying low a little bit for the longevity of. We got a lot of shows and a lot of shit lined up, so I don't want to blow myself out. So I have been taking it slightly easy, but I can't hold back when I'm on stage. Like, it's like you said, like I do have my own style and it's natural, and I gotta, if I'm sitting there just playing bass, that's not me, I gotta fucking vibe with what we're doing, and I can't help it. It's part of, it happens naturally. When I'm in the studio playing, I'm not gonna fucking wild out like that. Sometimes I feel like that too, but when you're on stage, you got it. That energy is fucking magical,
I think it's interesting when they said you have to step away from that lifestyle. I don't agree with leaving your artistic style. That if you're a musician, I feel that you should be a musician. It's almost like someone saying, I need to stop taking photos. Like, you can't just tell someone to do that. But I do understand the dynamic. It's more of like, if you're in a bad situation, stop everything and get away from that situation. If you really focus on like the music aspect, I mean, I think you're doing a pretty good job with that, with the whole route. But to piggyback on your story, I think it's interesting. Fishbone played Gramercy Theater, and as we know, Angelo's he's a wild card. So I was taking photos in the audience, and he pulled me on stage, and this was like broadcast on like Yahoo live stream, Live Nation, across like AOL.com, like 3 different outlets. And he's like, Jeffro, I want you to stage dive. And
I've seen that.
I remember I jumped, and like, if you look at the video, it cuts away. When I jumped, the video cuts away to Flying J in the mosh pit. What really happened was I jumped and I totally missed the crowd, and my chest hit the railing. And I'll tell you who was in front. It was our mutual friend Maddie Pasta was in front, and this girl that I was dating. And I jumped and I missed the fucking crowd, and I hit the railing. And the girl broke up with me that night. She's just like, she's like, this is embarrassing. And I'm like, I gave her a thumbs up. It was so fun. I'll never forget it. I don't know if Maddie Pasta remembers it, but so they cut away from when they put it up on Yahoo and AOL. They see me jump, but then they cut to a different angle.
I've seen the clip before. That's hilarious.
And then they cut back to me crowd surfing afterwards, because I ended up climbing into the crowd.
It's not how you hit the barrier. It's how you react to hitting the barrier. Your girl should have fucking been like, yeah, my man got back up. You wanted a story? I got a great one for you, actually. I'm playing in Murphy's Law. This is one of the best things. They flew us out for... Weird enough, I just fucking see it's in Venice, Italy, and I just looked at your vinyl. I'm like, wow. As I'm telling the story, I see Venice. So it's Venice, Italy. They fly us out for a festival show. We're there for like 3 or 4 days, and we're playing on day 2. So the day we play, someone gives us a gift of grappa. Italian grappa. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like all straight alcohol grain made from like the grappa, the grapes or whatever.
Like moonshine.
Like moonshine, Italian moonshine. Sucks, in my opinion. It tastes like licorice, but they gave us a case.
Damn.
So by the time the band with Murphy's Law, so it's me, it's Goat, Jimmy G, of course, and at the time, Ben, the guitar player, this guy Ben Shapiro, who was one of the guys that when I was playing with the band, one of the best guitar players I've ever played with. Him and my brother, like 2 of he was a fantastic player. He got shit-faced drunk, like embarrassingly. It was a big festival. We were the headliners, big American band, and we could barely like stand on stage. It was a giant stage, and it was either me. I think I was the first one. Went to fucking stage dive. It was like out of, just like you said, out of like a scene. All amped up, going to the crowd. I hit a fucking like 10-foot drop into like gravel, like some. I didn't break anything. But Ben, the guitar player, same thing. He did, like, he followed me, didn't realize there was nobody there, or they weren't catching us. I don't know what the deal was. He ended up like on the barrier, the front half on the barrier, and I'll never forget that vision I had in my head of seeing him like half on the barrier, like. Wow. And then we had to go back and do like half a set, like, oh my God, this is bad, and it was bad.
Damn. That's a crazy story. It's funny because like back in like the 90s and 2000s. That didn't happen in New York. New York, like, everyone caught you. Everyone. Yeah. It's almost like if it's not in New York, it's a different type of pit. You know what I mean? New York set the standard, right? Because like New York hardcore started in New York, and then it kind of branched out to like different aspects of the country. That mosh pit story, it's almost like New Yorkers, like it was so connected where it's like if someone falls, you're gonna lift them back up. If someone jumps, you're gonna catch them. It's like you have to catch them. So it's like almost, you know, you're in another country. They don't understand that's like a protocol. You have to catch them.
I hear what you're saying. I've never experienced, I think, at least in my experience, most countries you go to, like touring, it's kind of a universal thing. But you're right. At this, I don't know if it was the type of festival or whatever. There's like some rock bands on. I think it might have been a mixed music. But yeah, they you know, I learned a lesson. Be careful which country you fucking stage that in. But yeah, for whatever reason in Venice, Italy, they weren't catching the band. Maybe we were too high because we were coming off this big stage. It was a brutal drop, and I was like, I'll never forget it.
Like a 10-foot drop.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
right onto gravel. I was like, oh, and then this guy got stuck on the barrier. We have a barrage of shows coming up locally. We got my birthday Halloween annual bash at Kingsland tomorrow on the 28th. The following week is a Raised Fist production in Rockaway. We've been kind of killing it over in Rockaway. It's DeStefano Mazza is the guys from Porno for Pyros, the Jane's Addiction spinoff. Another thing I'm grateful for. We've been blessed to play with some of my favorite artists. I'm also a fan of Porno for Pyros and learning more about like Peter DeStefano and Mazza's world. So, and we're on the same, tip where he's sober from what I see and surfs. I'm actually looking forward to meeting him next week and talking to him. November 6th, a Sunday matinee, the next afternoon in Kearney, New Jersey. It's like Jimmy's Bar and Grill. Another blessing to be able to do stuff like that. It's a benefit for a women's shelter out there. It's called the Oasis Women's Shelter. I think it's in Paterson, New Jersey. So it's just for a good cause. And I want to get more involved in doing stuff like that in the future because as I get older, it's less to me about the money and doing shit like that. It's a good way to give back. So I'm, again, grateful that they asked us to do it.
I feel that the older you get, it's really about the positivity. Even in sobriety,
100%.
it's that not how many shows you can do. It's about the types of shows you're doing.
100%.
Like the Women of the Pit, you're doing it for a good cause.
Yep.
And it's almost like everything that you're doing is a step towards that positive light.
100%. I want to do as much as, anytime those opportunities arise, yes. It's more important to me than the money, without a doubt, these days. Yeah.
Well, cheers to sobriety.
Thank you.
And cheers to much success